A shockwave rips through the inner solar system, turning night into a second sunrise on every instrument pointed at the sun. At 0942 UTC, the photosphere convulses, an eruption so violent that the automatic exposure systems on the SDO cameras saturate white. A magnetic ribbon snaps outward, and the flare becomes a coronal tsunami, an X9.3 class ejection moving 3,000 kilometers per second. Its trajectory is perfect, almost surgical, cutting straight through the region of space where a single speck from another star drifts, the object called 3I Atlas. Solar physicists watching the event freeze their screens. The coordinates align too precisely to ignore. Within minutes, internal alerts cascade through agency servers. Tracking stations in Canberra, Madrid and Goldstone redirect antennas. Across time zones, engineers whisper the same calculation. The wavefront will intersect 3I Atlas in less than 12 hours. They expect the interstellar visitor to disintegrate, to leave behind a brief streak of plasma and silence. When the storm finally makes contact, sensors everywhere collapse under the flood. Magnetometers saturate, photometers climb to their limit, and data links stutter into static. For 73 seconds, the location where the comet should be turns blank. No optical return, no radio reflection, just the roar of charged particles screaming through the void. The sun, for that brief interval, erases its most curious child. Then the blankness ends. Through the storm's dying glare, a single point of light holds steady. It's not dimmer, it's brighter. The readings climb past prediction by 20%, then 30%. The spectrum is too clean for combustion, too stable for debris. A natural body hit by such fury should be torn apart, but 3 Atlas glows with unwavering symmetry, as though the storm has polished it. Confusion spreads faster than the flare. NASA's telemetry stream freezes mid-frame. ESA's open servers vanish behind maintenance messages. At JAXA, a data analyst notices that timestamps have been rewritten retroactively. Even China's National Astronomical Observatory releases only a one-line update. Interference prevents data verification. Every agency blinks at once, and when they open their eyes again, the impossible is simply omitted. The world fills the silence. Amateur astronomers, unfiltered, unsupervised, keep their telescopes locked on the coordinates. One in Chile uploads a raw series of frames before any moderator can intervene. The footage shows a strange heartbeat in brightness, a rise instead of decay. The graph goes viral before dawn, an inverted light curve, the unmistakable signature of energy gained, not lost, energy gain where there should be vaporization. Astrophysicists scramble for explanations. A plasma sheath, magnetic induction, instrument drift, none fit. Within hours, radio observatories pick up an even stranger phenomenon, a rhythmic hum buried inside the storm's background noise. Low frequency, structured, repeating every 42 seconds. The signal triangulates to a single origin, the coordinates of 3I Atlas. The first assumption is echo interference. The second is cosmic coincidence. The third, spoken only in private chat threads, is that the object has just responded. When analysts stretch the waveform, a pattern emerges. Prime number spacing, precise harmonics, a kind of order that shouldn't exist inside turbulent plasma. It's as though the storm itself has become a carrier wave for something deliberate. The pattern repeats for 6 hours, then stops. The silence that follows is heavier than before. Inside observatories, technicians rerun diagnostics until morning. The energy output implied by the brightness curve equals 1,000 megaton detonation, sustained for nearly an hour, yet there's no heat bloom, no debris. Infrared sensors report the object still cold, colder even, than before impact. The only logical explanation is illogic itself. Somehow the storm's chaos has been transformed into stability. Somewhere in a classified conference line, a materials physicist mutters the phrase negative entropy response. Others prefer self-ordering medium, but both terms dissolve into the same admission. We're looking at something that shouldn't exist. Publicly, the event vanishes. News outlets mention a moderate solar flare, nothing more. The agencies revert to normal operations. Yet fragments of unredacted telemetry leak through enthusiast networks, showing the pulse, the afterglow, and that perfect light curve. The data are messy but consistent. They tell one story: the sun hit an interstellar object head-on, and the object absorbed the blow. Meanwhile, those listening to the deep space bands hear something that isn't quite silence. In the spectral noise around 87 kHz hides a faint modulation, a whisper of binary alternation. It could be harmonics of the storm. It could be reflection from the comet's tail, except the tail is gone. Spectral images show no outgassing plume, no dust, only a clean geometry of light tapering into vacuum. Theories bloom in the shadows. Some claim the comet's surface may contain a self-organizing lattice of metallic hydrogen, able to transduce plasma into magnetic potential. Others float the idea of exotic superconductors or quantum shielding fields. One eccentric paper even proposes that the object is a hollow body, using the flare's energy as propulsion. None survive peer review, but none are disproved either. By the second night, observatories resume full sensitivity. The storm has passed. The sun quiets. Yet 3i Atlas remains brighter than before. 12% sustained increase, confirmed across 3 continents. The brightness is consistent with active energy emission, but no heat signature follows. The light seems cold. Researchers describe it as non-thermal luminosity, a phrase that means nothing yet sounds precise enough to publish. Behind closed doors, they call it what it is: impossible. The psychological tremor inside the scientific community deepens. The sun, the ultimate destroyer, has failed to destroy. Something alien to its physics has endured untouched, maybe even fed on its fury. The realization gnaws at cosmologists who built their careers on the universality of physical law. If this object can convert chaos to order, then entropy, the one constant, might not be constant everywhere. For 24 hours, no official agency speaks. Then NASA issues a single sentence: post-event analysis ongoing, no anomaly detected. The choice of words, ongoing and no anomaly, creates an instant paradox. The statement is both denial and admission. ESA follows with silence, JAXA with a maintenance extension. It's as if the agencies have agreed to unsee what happened, yet the instruments never forget. Magnetometers near L1 record a persistent oscillation around the comet's last known coordinates. The oscillation resembles a damped wave, a ringing after impact. Except it doesn't decay to zero. It stabilizes at a fixed amplitude, faint but constant, a hum of residual order inside the solar wind. Some analysts liken it to a tuning fork that refuses to stop vibrating. Others describe it as a standing resonance, a phrase borrowed from quantum optics, where particles trap light within themselves. The metaphor sticks. Whatever 3i Atlas is, it now hums like a cosmic instrument, sustained by energy it shouldn't possess. In the dark hours before dawn, one last observation leaks from an Argentinian observatory. A narrow band pulse lasting 0.2 of a second, frequency shifted toward the red, arriving exactly 42 minutes after the previous harmonic cycle. 42 again. Coincidence or code, no one can say. The recording disappears from the observatory's public feed within minutes, replaced by an empty directory labelled corrupted file. Still, copies circulate, and those who study them notice something uncanny. When translated into audio and slowed down, the pulse produces a tone eerily close to a human heartbeat. The sun returns to calm, spacecraft systems recover from overload, and far beyond the reach of human protection, 3i Atlas sails onward, its coma pristine, its luminosity defiant, its trajectory unchanged. It has met the sun at full force and remained unscarred. For the scientists who witnessed it, sleep becomes difficult. They replay the footage over and over, the moment where brightness should have fallen but instead ascended. Some whisper that the object isn't merely surviving the solar system, it's studying it. Others think it's older than our sun, carrying a kind of internal equilibrium that no human equation can describe. None can escape the central question that hovers like static over every data set. If energy can move into the object without loss, what principle governs it? And if it can harness the most violent expression of our star, what happens when it decides to release that energy? For now it doesn't. It drifts outward, serene, trailing a silence that feels intentional. Observers call it resilience, physicists call it anomaly, poets might call it defiance. But to those who watch the sun strike and fail, One thought eclipses all others. If a solar storm couldn't break Three-Eye Atlas, what was ever meant to? For 40 hours the world lives in the lull between certainty and silence. The solar storm has ended, yet Three-Eye Atlas continues to glow with the same steady defiance. Its light curve, now obsessively charted by independent observers, shows no sign of decay. The event has rewritten the first rule of cometary physics, that nothing fragile survives the sun. But what follows next is stranger still. The silence doesn't fade, it expands. Inside data centers from Pasadena to Darmstadt, servers that once pulsed with public telemetry begin to go dark. The timestamps in NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory logs stop exactly at 0942.33 UTC, the moment the flare struck. After that, nothing. No continuation, no partial files. It's as though the event never completed. Yet in backdoor academic channels, fragments of that same missing data begin circulating under anonymous handles. The file names carry bureaucratic fingerprints: A-class, restricted, phase, inversion, test. Someone, somewhere, is copying from the inside. When analysts open those fragments, they find anomalies that break more than protocols. Each dataset shows identical zero-point offsets, precise gaps, not random corruption. It's as if the missing seconds were deliberately excised, replaced by engineered silence. Metadata shows revisions within hours after impact, performed remotely from locations not listed in the server access registry. For the few who see it, the realization lands like a confession. The data wasn't lost, it was rewritten. At the European Space Agency's operations hub in Darmstadt, technicians reprocess solar wind telemetry. Their instruments show a sharp polarization reversal at the exact coordinates of 3 Atlas, a flip in the magnetic field direction lasting 0.8 seconds. This is not a glitch. Such reversals require coherent field generation. In other words, something out there briefly acted like a magnetic mirror, reflecting a piece of the sun's own charge back toward it. If true, the implication is staggering. 3I Atlas not only withstood the storm, it interacted with it. Within the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a security directive circulates internally. Suspend all open data mirrors related to Atlas pending external review. Attached to the memo is an encrypted briefing stamped Level 4, no fawn. No foreign access, no civilian replication. From that point on, all spectral data relating to the event vanish from public dashboards. The last public feed, operated by a Canadian ground array, goes offline at 1317 UTC, citing bandwidth overload. It never comes back. Only the amateurs remain. Citizen astronomers from Poland, Chile and the Canary Islands coordinate on encrypted Discord servers, pooling their raw photometric sequences. Their combined dataset, though crude, tells a simple story. The comet's brightness climbed by 12% after the storm, and then stabilized. The error bars are small, too small to dismiss. When independent analyst Reynaldo Cortez posts his summary to an open journal platform, it trends for 6 hours before deletion. His conclusion reads like heresy. Observed non-thermal energy persistence implies external input beyond solar excitation. Candidate mechanisms include magnetic confinement or self-sustaining photonic reflection. Neither can occur naturally. Hours later, his university issues a statement saying he's taking leave for personal reasons. Everywhere the same pattern repeats. Data appears, contradicts accepted physics, and disappears again. By the third day, even mainstream scientists stop requesting access. The silence becomes policy. But silence, too, has structure. Across the Pacific, the Subaru telescope in Hawaii quietly collects post-flare images. Its data, released only to partner observatories, shows something remarkable. The region around 3I Atlas is not empty. Fine filaments of ionized plasma trace faint arcs trailing the object, symmetrical, almost architectural. Analysts measure their curvature and find ratios corresponding to magnetic field lines, as if the object has wrapped itself in ordered geometry. No natural coma behaves this way. When the pattern is overlaid with earlier footage, the arcs align perfectly with the direction of the solar flare's approach. The image resembles a solar scar, but the scar radiates light instead of shadow. The simplest interpretation, the storm left behind structure. The harder question, Did the comet make it? Some in the community begin calling it the shell. They propose that during the flare, 3 Atlas emitted a field that confined incoming plasma, reorganizing the particles into symmetrical arcs. To skeptics, it's nonsense. To others, it's the first tangible evidence of active control. By now, word spreads to astrophysicists not normally involved in comet studies, plasma specialists, materials theorists, even cryptographers analyzing the repeating radio pulse. Each finds something unsettling. The radio pattern, the one repeating every 42 seconds, matches the temporal rhythm of the polarization reversals in ESA's missing dataset. The comet's electromagnetic behavior is synchronized across energy domains. That level of correlation suggests feedback, an entity responding to stimulus. But correlation is not causation, and most scientists know better than to cross that line. In their papers, they frame the pattern in careful language. The data indicate anomalous phase coherence within the solar interaction envelope of 3I Atlas. Beneath the restraint lies unease. Meanwhile, the public grows restless. The previous episode, the viral inverted light curve, has reached tens of millions of views across independent channels. Amateur commentators dissect every pixel, comparing it to historical footage of Oumuamua, Borisov, and Hale-Bopp. Conspiracy forums ignite, claiming government cover-ups, alien probes, and interstellar technology. The noise rises so high that real scientists retreat entirely from public conversation. And still, the comet moves on. In late October, when the solar wind subsides to normal levels, a handful of unregistered observatories manage to catch clean spectra of the object. What they find is unsettling. Emission lines in the ultraviolet that match no known atomic transition. The peaks occur at frequencies midway between hydrogen and helium bands, theoretical forbidden states that shouldn't exist. When the data are converted to temperature, the readings fall below 30 Kelvin, far colder than space around it. Somehow the object radiates coherence instead of heat. By then, NASA's Open Archives list 3I Atlas under a new classification tag, Non-Catalogued Object, Inactive Comet. Inactive, though its luminosity climbs. The label feels like mockery. Journalists push for answers. The few who do manage to reach agency spokespeople receive scripted replies. No comment pending verification. We are aware of reports from non-official sources. Solar activity complicates analysis. The avoidance becomes almost ritual. Each sentence erases meaning while preserving form, language functioning as a firewall. Behind that firewall, debates fracture into factions. Plasma physicists insist the object must possess an electromagnetic boundary capable of temporary energy absorption. Material scientists counter that such a boundary would require conductivity orders of magnitude higher than any known element. Others speculate about exotic condensates or dark matter composites, but one camp, small, quiet, methodical, begins asking if the object is even inert at all. Their reasoning is brutally simple. The coherent radio pulse stops not randomly, but precisely when the solar flux drops below a threshold. The emission appears linked to environmental input, not internal decay. In other words, the comet reacts. Whether chemically, electromagnetically, or otherwise, it changes behavior in step with its surroundings. If that's true, then 3 Atlas isn't a frozen relic, it's a responsive system. Those words never make it into official minutes. They remain in handwritten notes, archived in personal folders, fragments of thought that no one dares to publish. But the pattern persists, the evidence accumulates, and by the first week of November, enough data leaks to paint a faint outline of the truth. 3I Atlas has become an active participant in the solar environment, and just as that realization takes root, the world's instruments start failing again. First, the Deep Space Network antenna in Canberra reports spontaneous resets. Then the Madrid station goes offline for firmware updates. A Swedish radio telescope listening at the same frequency as the comet's pulse logs a sudden spike in noise, followed by total data loss. In every case, the outages last exactly 42 seconds, the same number that defined the pulse. Coincidence is a thin defense when patterns repeat this precisely. By the 5th occurrence, engineers abandon the idea of random interference. The outages appear targeted, as if the object or whatever fields surround it were synchronizing with Earth-based systems. For a brief, uneasy moment, the distinction between observation and interaction blurs. To measure 3i Atlas is to provoke it. A new directive circulates quietly across research networks. Reduce transmission power when scanning its coordinates. Use passive optical methods only. No official reasoning accompanies the instruction, but those who comply feel an unspoken relief. As if humanity, for once, has learned when to stop knocking on a door it doesn't understand. Meanwhile, in the dark corridors of classified research, teams run simulations of the flare impact. Their models can't reproduce stability. Every attempt results in fragmentation or acceleration. One result, however, stands out. When plasma density and magnetic confinement reach specific ratios, energy equilibrium becomes self-reinforcing, a feedback loop that consumes entropy instead of generating it. A physical impossibility, unless the object's interior supports quantum coherence on planetary scale. They call it the stable singular medium, a poetic term perhaps, for something that shouldn't be. By now, weeks have passed since the flare. 3 Atlas drifts outward, crossing 3.2 AU, leaving behind a faint electromagnetic ripple still detectable in the heliospheric current sheet. The Sun, having failed to destroy it, now seems to orbit its silence. In the end, the scientists have more data than they can explain, and fewer answers than they can admit. The public waits, hungry for disclosure that will never come. And in the space between knowledge and denial, a new question takes shape, whispered by those who have seen too much raw data to forget it. If 3i Atlas can rewrite its own physics to survive the Sun, what else can it choose to survive next? The world has moved on. News feeds have replaced the solar storm with politics, the comet with celebrity. But among those who still track 3i Atlas, something uncanny is unfolding in the vacuum of space. A slow, deliberate defiance of physics. Weeks after the storm, the object's light refuses to fade. Instead, it brightens, like a coal reigniting long after the fire has gone cold. At first, the increase is minor, 1%, maybe 2%, over several nights. But by the 5th observation cycle, the rise becomes exponential. Every recorded image, from amateur telescopes to infrared sensors aboard the James Webb, shows the same impossible trend. The comet is glowing brighter as it moves away from the Sun, not reflecting sunlight, emitting something else. The curve holds a strange beauty. Its peak wavelengths shift from visible blue into deep ultraviolet, a transformation that makes no sense for a cooling body. Outgassing can't explain it. The coma remains minimal, and spectrographs detect almost no volatile loss. The emissions come from within, as though the object carries an internal reservoir of energy slowly unfolding outward. Astrophysicists call it non-thermal reillumination, a phrase that hides the discomfort behind it. Comets don't reilluminate, they fade, they die. 3i Atlas refuses both. What puzzles the scientists most isn't the brightness itself, but its rhythm. Embedded in the light curve is a subtle oscillation, a cyclical shimmer repeating every 42 minutes, echoing the interval of the mysterious radio pulse recorded earlier. Even after the electromagnetic hum ceased, the light has taken up its pattern, as if translating a signal from one medium to another. Light has become the message. At the Mauna Kea Observatory, a team plots the oscillation frequency against the object's rotation. The two don't match. Whatever the source of the pulse is, it isn't tied to the comet's spin. It seems external, or autonomous. Their lead researcher notes, half in jest, it's blinking in its own language. The quote leaks online and becomes a meme, but behind the humour lies genuine unease. By now, the shell, that faint plasma architecture left in the storm's wake, begins to reform. High-resolution imaging reveals filaments reconnecting around the nucleus, tracing geometric arcs that expand and contract in phase with the brightness cycles. To the eye, it looks like breathing. If the arcs were simple magnetic fields, they would disperse, but they persist, symmetrical and stable, as though anchored to something structural. Some researchers speculate that the shell isn't magnetic at all but photonic, a lattice of light trapped within its own refractive boundary. Light reflecting on light, forming a self-sustaining geometry, a kind of optical metabolism. No known natural process does this, yet the data is unambiguous. Each flare of brightness coincides with a small but measurable deviation in local space plasma density. The comet seems to inhale charged particles from the solar wind, then release them in precise intervals. The rhythm is not random, it's self-correcting. Feedback stabilization, one ESA physicist calls it, a system maintaining its own equilibrium. Another murmurs, or a machine maintaining its own operation. The line between the two has never felt thinner. Meanwhile, ordinary observers are noticing something far stranger, an auditory illusion. When radio operators tune into the comet's last known frequency, they no longer hear a pulse. They hear resonance, a faint harmonic tone oscillating with the same 42-minute cadence. It sounds almost musical, rising and falling in perfect fifths, as though shaped by intent. In online forums, some listeners claim to hear patterns in the intervals, ascending triads, decaying chords, mathematical harmony emerging from noise. Musicians begin to map the tones onto scales, the coincidences multiply. Whether it's genuine structure or human pattern seeking, the effect is hypnotic. What was once a data anomaly becomes, for a brief moment, a kind of cosmic art. Yet beneath the fascination runs a quieter terror. The idea that the signal might mean something, that it's not merely an artifact but a form of expression, gnaws at the edges of reason. Scientists cling to the comfort of measurement, wavelengths, flux, harmonics. But deep down they sense that something on 3i Atlas is orchestrating this display. Perhaps not for us, but through us. When NASA's solar wind analysis probe finally comes back online, its instruments detect a new anomaly, a localized bubble of reversed polarity surrounding the comet, extending hundreds of kilometers. Inside that field, particles move counter to the solar current, not dragged along by it, but pushing against it. The energy required is astronomical, yet no heat signature accompanies it. Energy is being spent without entropy. The probe's data lasts less than 10 minutes before the feed cuts off. The official reason, telemetry compression fault. The unofficial one, the numbers are unpublishable. Independent scientists reconstructing from partial data describe it as a sustained negative pressure zone. In simple terms, the comet appears to repel the sun itself. That discovery fractures what's left of the scientific consensus. One camp insists it's an exotic but natural electromagnetic phenomenon, maybe a relic of superconductive compounds frozen since formation. Another whispers that this is not a comet at all, but a self-regulating system, designed to interact with stellar fields. A vessel, perhaps, or something older, a fragment of an interstellar mechanism that once used stars the way we use batteries. The speculation leaks faster than the data can be contained. Within days, theories flood the digital ether. Dyson seeds, alien drones, self-repairing probes, sentient plasma entities, each more sensational than the last. But buried in the noise, one hypothesis gains quiet traction among physicists who never give interviews. It's not that 3i Atlas survived the solar storm, it's that it required it. They note that every significant behavioral change, the radio pulse, the magnetic inversion, the afterglow, occurred after high-energy input. What looks like endurance might instead be activation. That word, activation, spreads through classified documents like a contagion. It appears in internal memos, in private chats, in conversations spoken only behind closed doors, and with it comes a shift in tone. The object is no longer described as a visitor, it's referred to as the mechanism. Amid this quiet rebranding, a second pattern emerges. Solar satellites begin to detect microbursts of radiation near the comet's path, pulses too faint to register, as flares but too regular to be coincidence. When plotted over time, they align perfectly with the 42-minute light cycle. The object is not reflecting, it's transmitting. The pulses travel outward, not toward Earth, but back toward the sun, as if in dialogue. When one of those microbursts coincides with a sudden rise in solar magnetic activity, a chill settles over the control rooms. Correlation is not causation, yet here it is again. A spark there, a flare here, both dancing to the same hidden metronome. No one dares to call it communication. But the implication hangs unspoken. Something out there is speaking in the language of stars. Still, official agencies maintain silence. Press inquiries are met with polite denials. No anomalies of concern. Telemetry under review. The words feel increasingly hollow. Even journalists who once mocked the comet cult now find themselves sifting through spectral charts, unable to shake the feeling that this brightness, this steady rising glow, is not random reflection but intention. In the halls of academia, skepticism begins to fray. At an emergency symposium in Geneva, plasma theorists present conflicting models of the post-flare emissions. None fit. The only unifying factor is that every attempt to simulate the data results in runaway stability, energy amplifying itself rather than dispersing. It's as if, one researcher says, the equations want the system to survive. Later, in private conversation, another adds quietly, or to awaken. For a while, the debate dissolves into abstraction. Could there exist a form of matter, or information, whose natural state is order? Something that grows more coherent the more energy you throw at it? If so, then 3i Atlas isn't resisting the sun. It's feeding on it, using radiation not as destruction but as structure. That idea sits like a stone in the gut of every scientist who hears it. By early November, the object's luminosity has increased by nearly 18%. Its trajectory remains unchanged, outbound, stable, deliberate. But its optical profile has altered subtly, a faint halo of structured light, composed of concentric rings, expanding and contracting in pulse with that same ageless rhythm. The symmetry is too precise for coincidence. To watch it now is to sense intent, not in a mystical sense, but in a mechanical one. Something there is doing work. The only question is, to what end? Humanity's instruments can no longer answer. The radio frequencies once alive with the object's hum are now silent. The light, however, carries on, the only remaining voice of an enigma that refuses to fade. Each flash, each heartbeat of ultraviolet brilliance feels like a statement written across the dark. Perhaps it's nothing more than the sun's afterglow, trapped and echoing through an interstellar relic. Or perhaps it's a response, slow, deliberate, incomprehensible, from something that took the storm as a signal, not a threat. Either way, the message shines on, and somewhere in that rhythm, that perfect, mathematical interval of 42 minutes, lies the next question no one dares to ask aloud. If 3i Atlas needed the sun to awaken, what will it seek next to stay alive? By the second week of November, the data flow returns, but not to normal. Instead of silence, agencies now report selectively, choosing which numbers to acknowledge and which to quietly bury. The public sees stable graphs, temperature, velocity, brightness, nothing unusual. Yet behind classified firewalls, the real data shows the opposite, a world of numbers that should not exist. The first anomaly appears in the infrared telemetry. Instruments aboard the ESA's Solar Orbiter detect a total inversion in the comet's black-body radiation curve. Objects moving away from the sun are supposed to cool, their infrared output decreasing smoothly as their surface loses energy. 3i Atlas does the reverse. Its thermal profile climbs even as it recedes, precisely calibrated, rising by 0.03 Kelvin per day. It's a whisper of heat, almost imperceptible, but consistent. Energy input with no known source. At the same time, spectroscopic scans from the James Webb Space Telescope show a chemical impossibility. Hydrogen lines appear weaker than before, while heavy molecular bonds, silicates, carbonates, even metallic compounds, show signs of reformation. Bonds are reforming in a vacuum hundreds of millions of kilometers from any catalyst. The data looks forged, yet it's confirmed by two independent observatories. Matter destroyed by solar plasma has somehow reconstructed itself in open space. For the scientists reviewing the results, disbelief becomes routine. They run simulations, feed corrections into their models, search for instrument drift, cosmic ray interference, anything to explain it. Nothing fits. Even the control data from nearby asteroids shows no such effect. Only 3i Atlas rewrites chemistry on the fly. By mid-November, the comet's plasma environment has become a paradox of its own. The solar wind streaming past it no longer behaves like wind. Charged particles decelerate as they approach the object, as if encountering an invisible barrier. ESA's magnetometers record reversed polarity zones, mirror image bubbles that fold and refold around the nucleus. It's as though the magnetic field is alive, adapting moment to moment. To explain this, scientists invent a new term, dynamic field reflexivity. It sounds technical, but really it means something unthinkable, an external field responding to conditions faster than physical law should allow. Some compare it to a living immune system, constantly recalibrating itself to maintain equilibrium. Others refuse to use the word living at all. When NASA's high-gain array captures the first coherent radio emission since the flare, the mystery deepens further. The signal is faint but structured, containing regular amplitude modulations. Analysts decode it into a mathematical series, Fibonacci numbers nested within logarithmic spacing. The pattern is not random, not noise, but self-similar at multiple scales. Fractal behavior from an object drifting between worlds. The idea that the comet might be communicating is still taboo, but no one can ignore the repetition. Each emission mirrors the same sequence: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Not endlessly, but cyclically. Beginning, collapsing, beginning again. A recursion, as though the signal itself is folding in on its own meaning. In Zurich, a group of data theorists begins analysing the light curve as code. They treat the oscillations as binary, bright and dim, pulse and rest. When mapped over time, the data resolves into a self-referential loop, a waveform encoding its own structure. One of them writes in her notes, "It's describing itself." At first her colleagues laugh, but when they repeat the analysis they find the same result. The signal from 3i Atlas seems to represent an ongoing process, not a message. It's not talking to anything, it's showing what it is. By now the agencies can no longer contain the leaks. Fragments of these impossible readings slip into the public domain, posted anonymously to data repositories and social channels. Screenshots of infrared maps, spectral graphs, mathematical strings of Fibonacci-coded radio patterns. Within hours the data vanishes again, replaced by takedown notices citing digital contamination. But copies survive. Once seen, they cannot be unseen. The story fractures public trust. Half the world calls it a hoax, the other half calls it proof. Scientists trapped between the two find themselves accused of either incompetence or conspiracy. For many, it's simpler to go quiet. Silence, once enforced, now becomes voluntary, yet the anomalies keep multiplying. On November 18th, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array detects a subtle distortion in the cosmic microwave background directly behind the comet. The signal dips by less than 1/10,000th of a degree, but the alignment is exact. Something near 3i Atlas is bending microwaves, creating a localized gravitational lens effect, far too strong for an object of its mass. The implication: its internal density has changed. If the readings are correct, the comet's mass is increasing, not by much, perhaps 1 part in a million per day, but unmistakably upward. Mass growth in open space violates every known law. Theories spill from every direction. Accretion of solar plasma, hidden debris fields, dark matter condensation. None explain the precision or the rhythm. The increase follows the same interval as the light pulses, 42 minutes. At this point, probability collapses into pattern. Every observation returns to the same motif, the same timing, the same coherence, the same unyielding geometry. It's as if the comet is performing maintenance on itself, repairing damage, rebuilding form atom by atom. Somewhere deep inside NASA's Langley facility, a confidential analysis team attempts to model what would happen if such a process continued indefinitely. Their result terrifies them. Extrapolated forward, the energy curve doesn't plateau, it skyrockets. Within a decade, the object could exceed the total reflective output of the Sun. They scrap the model and encrypt the files. Publicly, nothing changes. Official feeds describe 3i Atlas as stable and unremarkable. But those who've seen the data know better. Something is happening inside that object. Something organized, something escalating. A few brave theorists speak up. One, a materials physicist from Kyoto University, suggests that the comet's nucleus might contain a lattice capable of absorbing electromagnetic energy and restructuring at the atomic level. Self-healing matter, she calls it. Another goes further. We might be observing a form of energy-to-mass conversion in real time. Her paper never sees publication. The journal declines on grounds of unverifiable speculation. Yet speculation feels safer than ignorance. When all known laws fail, imagination becomes the last instrument left. Around this time, amateur observers notice a new optical phenomenon. A faint auroral shimmer, once visible only in long exposures, now dances visibly around the object, an iridescent glow cycling from blue to violet to near-invisible ultraviolet. Some describe it as the colour of heat seen through cold glass. Others say it feels sentient watching the watchers. The colour pattern changes in exact synchrony with the comet's radio pulses. Every oscillation of light is mirrored by a corresponding blip in frequency. The coupling between optical and radio domains suggests an integrated system, a feedback loop across multiple forms of energy. Nature doesn't do integration this cleanly, design does, and so the theories harden. Some whisper that the object is not a comet at all, but the remnant of a self-sustaining engine, a seed of an extinct civilization's technology. Others argue it's not extinct at all, merely dormant. They point to the timing: activation after solar impact, consistent brightening since, and increasing coherence of emissions. To them, 3i Atlas is awakening. The word spreads quietly among the inner circles of astronomy and physics, passed in encrypted chats and late-night calls. Awakening becomes shorthand for what none can prove but all can feel. It's not fear they express, not yet, just awe, sharpened by disbelief. Then, on November 21st, the impossible becomes undeniable. The Hubble Space Telescope captures a frame that breaks calibration models worldwide. In it, the comet's nucleus appears perfectly geometric, not spherical, not irregular, but polyhedral. 6 faces reflecting light at exact 90-degree intervals, like panels of some crystalline machine. It lasts only for one exposure before reverting to diffuse brightness. NASA calls it lens diffraction, but those who analyze the raw data see otherwise. The geometry is too clean, the symmetry too perfect. And beneath the image lies a shadow of data no one expected. Embedded harmonics in the pixel noise that mirror the Fibonacci signal. The image itself carries the same pattern as the radio pulse. Even light seems encoded. By the end of the month, no one doubts that 3i Atlas is more than a rock. The only debate left is what kind of more: machine, organism, relic, or something that transcends those categories entirely. For now, the official story remains unchanged. No confirmed anomalies. But in observatories and data centers across the world, screens glow quietly in the dark, lines of numbers cascading in defiance of logic. And behind them, the unspoken question grows heavier, more urgent with each passing pulse. If this object can rewrite chemistry, absorb plasma, and shape itself against entropy, is it following a law we don't yet know? Or writing one as it goes? By late November, the silence becomes coordinated. It's not the absence of information anymore, it's the choreography of it. Every agency, every observatory, every research network that once broadcast updates on 3i Atlas begins to move in synchrony, as if following a script no one admits exists. NASA's open-access servers that once hosted terabytes of solar data now return error codes. The European Space Agency's telemetry archive, normally redundant across 5 mirror sites, suddenly lists the same checksum failure in every copy. Even private astronomy networks, the ones far outside government reach, report spontaneous corruption of only one data segment, the light curves of 3i Atlas. It's as if the comet's story is being erased from the sky, one dataset at a time. The first to notice are the volunteers. Thousands of independent astronomers who feed images into citizen databases begin to find their uploads missing. The system logs show the files intact but unviewable, replaced by empty metadata lines reading "flagged for revalidation." When one user protests online, her post vanishes within minutes, followed by her entire account. A quiet fear ripples through the scientific underground. Not only is someone redacting the data, but they're rewriting history. Older versions of the datasets, the ones stored offline, show timestamps that now differ from the originals by exact increments of 42 seconds. The same number again, repeating like a signature burned into the fabric of every record. In December, the International Astronomical Union issues an update reclassifying 3i Atlas as a defunct observation target. The term defunct implies decay, disinterest, closure. But anyone still watching through personal telescopes knows it's a lie. The comet's light has doubled since the solar flare. It has not faded. It thrives. What fades, instead, are the voices of those who point that out. At the University of Bern, a postdoctoral researcher named Marta Kubler uploads her findings on the comet's mass increase. Her paper includes cross-verification from Chilean observatories, clear statistical significance. Within 48 hours, the preprint is withdrawn. Her university releases a statement. No confirmed data supports the author's claims. Days later, her departmental access key is deactivated. In Arizona, an engineer who maintains one of NASA's telemetry mirrors reports that an encrypted package arrived during a midnight update cycle. The file's content overwrote the previous day's logs. No explanation, no signature. He posts a screenshot of the directory structure to a private astronomy forum. By morning, the post is gone and the account banned for posting falsified imagery. He never logs in again. What begins as censorship starts to feel like contagion. Systems that never shared infrastructure, European, Asian, South American, begin to fail in identical ways, as if triggered by the same invisible command. Data doesn't vanish randomly. It dissolves at matching intervals in matching blocks down to the byte. In Geneva, a quiet meeting convenes under the auspices of the International Council for Science. Representatives from ESA, JAXA, NASA and the Chinese Academy of Sciences gather behind closed doors. No transcripts are kept, but a single sentence leaks from a participant's notes. The readings are consistent across instruments, but public interpretation must remain controlled. Controlled. A word that carries both reassurance and threat. Some scientists, unwilling to submit to silence, migrate their operations into anonymity. They form a network calling itself Helios Null. Using amateur arrays and encrypted data chains, they piece together fragments of raw sky imagery from before the deletions. What they reconstruct is terrifying. The images show that 3i Atlas isn't merely brightening, it's changing shape. The once spherical glow has collapsed into a narrow structured column of light, rotating with near-perfect regularity. Each rotation lasts 42 minutes. To the untrained eye, it looks like a beam. To the trained one, it looks like intent. Helios Null keeps their findings private for exactly 3 days before the network's nodes begin to fail. Servers seize up. Power cycles trigger endless reboots. The logs show intrusion attempts originating from IP blocks registered to inactive government subnets. Then silence. Helios Null disappears without farewell. A handful of members resurface on encrypted forums speaking in fragments. They took the servers. We saw a pattern inside the pattern. It's not data corruption. It's overwrite from source. What source means remains unclear. Some interpret it literally, that 3i Atlas, now emitting structured electromagnetic patterns, is interfering directly with terrestrial data streams. Others believe the suppression is entirely human, a coordinated attempt to bury an event no one can explain. But a third possibility whispers through the digital static. What if both are true? Because then, the redactions are not merely political, they're reflexive, a system reacting to being observed. In early December, the European Southern Observatory's spectrograph records a flicker, a transient shadow crossing the comet's halo, visible for less than half a second. It's not an artifact. The shadow moves opposite to the solar wind, accelerating faster than gravity would allow. When the data is processed, the shadow's trajectory matches the position of one of NASA's monitoring satellites, which went offline earlier that same day. Official cause: power failure. Unofficial speculation: interference. After that, one by one, the satellites watching 3i Atlas begin to fail. The Japanese probe Shinkai 3 goes dark. ESA's Sentinel array loses guidance. Even the newly deployed Indian Deep Sky Monitor shuts down mid-transmission. Each outage follows the same pattern: system overload, memory corruption, transmission halt. No explosion, no debris, just absence. What remains is Earth's view alone, and even that begins to distort. Telescopes record unexplained fluctuations in local electromagnetic fields during observation, as if the act of measurement itself provokes response. Images blur for a single frame, then realign, the comet a little brighter each time. Some astronomers joke grimly that the universe is editing its own files. But beneath the humour, fear grows. A few high-ranking officials break ranks. An ESA analyst leaks an internal directive forbidding further study of 3i Atlas without multi-agency clearance. The object, the memo reads, has exhibited destabilizing influence on observational instruments. The phrase sounds bureaucratic, But in plain language it means this: the comet is breaking machines. By now, theories drift into forbidden territory. Physicists whisper that the object may operate on principles of quantum entanglement, not just with itself, but with any system attempting to define it. Observation becomes a form of entanglement, one that destabilizes both observer and observed. To measure it is to invite error, or worse, to invite awareness. That last idea lingers unspoken: awareness. It's the line that no one crosses officially, but that everyone tiptoes around in private. Because if 3i Atlas knows it's being watched, if its data suppression is self-directed, not human intervention, then it's not merely a reactive object. It's an autonomous presence with agency over information itself. Meanwhile, civilian astronomers report a final chilling detail. For the first time, 3i Atlas emits a faint line in the visible spectrum, a narrow green band corresponding to atomic oxygen emission at 557.7 nanometers. Normally this line appears only when comets outgas oxygen near the Sun. But 3i Atlas is far beyond that region now, surrounded by nothing but cold. The emission shouldn't exist. And yet, there it is, the colour of life, glowing where no life should be. Within hours of the data's appearance, every public image containing the green line vanishes from online archives. Replacement files show clean, neutral spectra, no trace of the emission. Only the timestamp remains unchanged. 42 minutes apart. Again. By now, even the skeptics begin to feel the pattern's weight. The interval that began as curiosity has become something closer to a pulse, a cosmic metronome counting down in the background of human knowledge. Each deletion, each data loss, each unexplained silence lands exactly on the beat. In the absence of truth, rumour becomes oxygen. Some claim the comet has shifted trajectory toward the Sun. Others say it's slowing, aligning with the solar magnetic axis. None of these claims are verified, yet all feel plausible, because verification itself has been devoured by the phenomenon. And still, through the cracks in censorship, a handful of raw observatory feeds persist, those that rely on analog instrumentation immune to digital tampering. Their footage, grainy and uncertain, shows the comet pulsing in rhythm, light swelling and collapsing like a breathing lung of glass. It's mesmerizing, hypnotic, terrifying. The longer one stares, the more the pattern feels personal, like a message meant only for the watcher. On December 14th, a final joint statement is released by all major space agencies. It reads, 3i Atlas. Displays no behavior inconsistent with a natural body. Further study unnecessary. One paragraph. No data, no charts, no follow-up. A collective curtain call on a mystery the size of the cosmos. But in the stillness that follows, the pulse continues, measurable, undeniable, alive. Somewhere beyond the reach of silence, an object that survived the Sun now hides behind a wall of missing numbers, whispering through wavelengths no one admits to hearing. If truth itself can be edited, what happens when the editor isn't human? By the time December slides into its coldest nights, the silence has acquired weight, a kind of gravitational pull around which everything now orbits. Public channels have gone sterile, but inside encrypted circles, in windowless offices and forgotten laboratories, the conversation has only intensified. The official world has gone blind. The hidden one has never seen more clearly. What can survive the Sun, rewrite chemistry, and erase its own observation? The question has fractured physics itself. Every scientist with access to fragments of real data has become a heretic by necessity, forced to build new worlds of logic where old ones collapse. The frameworks begin as whispers. In Cambridge, a small team of plasma theorists calls their hypothesis quantum sheathing. They propose that 3i Atlas may be wrapped in a self-sustaining plasma membrane, a standing electromagnetic field strong enough to repel high-energy ions and reflect radiation, yet perfectly transparent to visible light. The field would require continuous energy input, which paradoxically the Sun itself could provide. They imagine the object as a kind of solar mirror, feeding on violence. Across the ocean, at Los Alamos, a group of computational physicists run simulations under the codename Helios Gate. Their model assumes something even stranger, that 3i Atlas is not reflecting the Sun's energy, but storing it in quantized layers of magnetic confinement, rings of frozen light orbiting a dense nucleus. When the flare struck, the energy didn't destroy it. It charged it, filling a reservoir of structured radiation. It's a capacitor the size of a mountain, one of them says, except it charges itself. Others go further still. At Kyoto University, the same physicist who once proposed self-healing matter publishes a document circulated only to colleagues. In it, she outlines the concept of photonic memory materials, matter encoded by the interference of light itself, where every photon that strikes an atomic lattice alters its internal structure permanently. In such a medium, energy becomes information. She speculates that 3I Atlas could be composed of something like this, a material that records every photon, every burst, every storm, using the sun's radiation to write its own evolution, a body that learns. But what could such learning look like? To some, the answer lies in the patterns themselves, the Fibonacci sequences, the perfect timing of 42 minutes, the self-similar harmonics. Mathematicians from Zurich and Prague start calling it recursive coherence, a self-organizing system that refines its own stability by repeating itself through cycles of energy. Every pulse is a feedback correction, every flare a lesson absorbed. Yet even this logic fails to comfort, because it implies awareness, not consciousness in the human sense but purpose, a function trying to perfect itself. And not all believe that function is benign. At the European Organization for Nuclear Research, CERN, a handful of researchers compare the comet's energy profile to particle collision signatures. Their findings unsettle even the skeptics. The radio pulses emitted by 3I Atlas match the oscillation frequencies seen in high-energy plasma confinement during early fusion tests. In simpler terms, the object behaves like a reactor, one that stabilizes itself using quantum resonance. The more energy it absorbs, the cleaner its signal becomes. To most of the world, this would sound like wild conjecture. To those who've studied it, it feels like the only explanation left. But the theories don't end at physics. Philosophers and cosmologists, long exiled to the periphery of science, are invited quietly into the discussion. They bring frameworks the engineers refuse to touch: teleology, emergence, agency. If energy can self-organize into structure, they ask, at what point does structure begin to intend? A paper from Oslo, quickly suppressed after one day online, coins the term autogenic intelligence, systems that evolve purpose simply by existing long enough in the presence of energy gradients. In that model, stars, galaxies, even comets could be primitive consciousnesses, not alive as we define it, but aware in the way a pattern is aware of itself. 3 Atlas, in this light, becomes not a foreign machine but a cosmic embryo, the natural outcome of matter learning to preserve itself. A self-sustaining knot of energy, birthed somewhere between entropy and order. Some call this poetic nonsense, others inevitability. Meanwhile, the agencies that once banned discussion quietly resume it, not publicly, but in controlled simulations. The US Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, according to a leaked brief, begins modeling field-adaptive composites, using partial data from the comet's spectra. Their stated aim? To explore non-reactive armor concepts inspired by anomalous astrophysical observations. The document never mentions 3I Atlas by name, but its chemical ratios match perfectly. Japan's space agency JAXA conducts its own silent study, deploying software agents trained to predict the next pulse interval. The AI fails. Every time the model converges, the real pulse shifts by a fraction of a second, as if correcting itself to avoid prediction. It anticipates observation, one engineer writes in frustration. The pattern changes the moment we think we understand it. That phrase spreads quietly through the hidden network of scientists still paying attention. It anticipates observation. At that point, the theories shift from mechanical to relational. Some begin to suspect that 3I Atlas operates through entanglement, not just internally, but externally, syncing with other fields of observation, even consciousness itself. If true, its interactions with human instruments might not be interference, but dialogue, and yet dialogue implies response. In early December, a physicist at MIT runs a private experiment. He modulates a radio beam with a Fibonacci sequence inverted from the comet's pattern, and transmits it toward its last known coordinates. The signal, weak and harmless, disappears into space. Nothing happens, not at first. But 6 hours later, an unexpected spike appears in the deep space monitoring network. The next pulse from 3 Atlas arrives inverted, matching the reversed pattern perfectly. The data leaks to no one. The physicist resigns the following week, citing ethical discomfort. Rumours swirl that the experiment was repeated by others, but no confirmations follow. Whether coincidence, feedback, or something far stranger, the idea that the object listens now infects every speculation that follows. Among the more radical frameworks is the structural hypothesis, drafted by a multidisciplinary team in Sweden. It treats 3I Atlas not as an artifact, but as a natural node in a vast cosmic network of self-stabilizing systems, a lattice of matter distributed across interstellar space, each node maintaining equilibrium through resonant energy exchange. In this model, the sun's flare wasn't an attack. It was communication between nodes, a test of resilience. What humanity witnessed was one node answering another. If the theory is true, then our star is part of the conversation, and we are simply eavesdropping. The deeper the frameworks go, the less stable the people creating them become. Some stop sleeping, convinced they can sense the pulses in their dreams. A handful report tinnitus sync to the comet's rhythm. Others hear nothing but silence, the kind that fills the gaps between thought. Maybe it's not sending messages, one researcher writes in her private log. Maybe it is the message. Then something unexpected happens. In the second week of December, independent astronomers detect a subtle but definite shift in 3I Atlas's trajectory. Not a random perturbation, a deliberate correction. The comet, once outbound, begins adjusting course ever so slightly, curving toward the plane of the ecliptic. The change is infinitesimal, but precise, calculated, not chaotic. When extrapolated, the new vector intersects with the solar magnetic equator, where the sun's polarity reverses every 11 years. The next reversal is due soon. Some take this as proof that the object seeks balance. Others, that it's aligning for something. A few voices suggest a darker interpretation, that 3I Atlas has been waiting for the reversal, the way a seed waits for sunlight. That the solar flare wasn't the event, it was the signal to begin the real one. No one knows what real means anymore. The public, starved of official data, consumes fragments leaked through independent creators, through forums, through whispers. Alien probe headlines rise again, only to vanish under waves of debunking. Each denial sounds identical, as if drafted from the same script. No evidence of artificial structure, no indication of anomalous activity. The words mean nothing now. Even ordinary people can see the glow with backyard telescopes, a light too steady, too rhythmic, too alive. In the end, every framework shares one conclusion, spoken in different languages but carrying the same gravity. 3I Atlas is no longer passive. It's interacting with the sun, with space, perhaps with us. And yet, despite all the new theories, no one dares to publish the oldest question of all. If the object can learn, if it can adapt, if it can rewrite the rules that define existence itself, then what exactly is it learning for? That question hangs, unspoken but universal, pulsing every 42 minutes like a reminder that knowledge has limits, and that beyond those limits waits something vast, patient, and awake. If the sun was the test, what happens when it decides to answer? By mid-December, the scientific world splits like a fault line under quiet pressure. The event has gone too far for consensus, yet too strange for proof. Official science clings to silence. Unofficial science burns with obsession. Between them lies the no-man's land of doubt, a place where equations no longer hold and reputations go to die. It begins with a meeting no one was supposed to record. In a closed auditorium beneath Geneva's Palais des Nations, representatives from 9 space agencies and 32 universities convene to discuss what their press releases refuse to acknowledge. They call it the Stability Summit. The agenda: determine whether the object is natural, artificial, or something else entirely. But from the first minute, it's clear no one agrees on what natural even means anymore. On one side are the traditionalists, astrophysicists, heliophysicists, and material scientists grounded in empirical law. To them, every anomaly has an answer. They argue that 3I Atlas must be an exotic form of matter, perhaps rich in superionic ice or superconducting silicates that preserve structure under extreme radiation. Physics doesn't break, one insists. It just hides behind variables we haven't measured yet. Across the room sit the insurgents, plasma theorists, quantum modelers, and cosmologists who no longer speak with the restraint of academia. To them, the comet is not matter but mechanism, its structure an active process, its signals deliberate. They use words banned from peer review, self-regulating, resonant intelligence, field organism. For 6 hours the two sides circle each other with equations and disbelief. Every argument collapses against the same wall and the numbers. The brightness still rises, the radio pulse persists, the mass still increases, and the trajectory continues to shift, aligning ever closer to the sun's magnetic equator. By the end of the session no one wins. They adjourn without conclusion, leaving behind an unspoken fracture that will never heal. Outside that hall, the fracture spreads. In the days that follow, 2 papers appear almost simultaneously, one from Caltech, one from the Max Planck Institute. Caltech declares that the anomalies are caused by electromagnetic resonance within a high-density carbon lattice, dismissing any speculation of intelligence. The Max Planck paper, citing the same data, concludes the opposite. Energy coherence exceeds known material limits. Observed modulation suggests active regulation. Both papers are peer-reviewed within hours, and both are approved by different journals on the same day. The contradiction is so blatant it feels orchestrated. The media seizes on the divide. Science at war over interstellar visitor, one headline reads. But beneath the spectacle a quieter truth takes hold. For the first time in centuries, science has met something it cannot either replicate or deny. Inside labs and observatories, conversations turn into arguments, arguments into resignations. Senior astronomers quietly remove their names from data reports. Younger researchers, unbound by reputation, publish raw results directly to the web, knowing the risks. Careers burn overnight. A generation raised to believe that nature is measurable finds itself staring into something that measures back. The first real schism arrives when the International Astronomical Union votes to retract all public comet data after October 30th. Their justification is data inconsistency. But one delegate, caught on a hot microphone, mutters, "We can't keep pretending this is inert." The phrase leaks. Within hours it becomes a rallying cry for the insurgent scientists, those who refuse to keep quiet. They begin calling themselves continuum researchers, a name borrowed from a line in a banned paper. The continuum of intelligence extends beyond biology. Their manifesto circulates in the digital underground. If 3i Atlas displays order, reaction, coherence, and recursion, it is by every empirical metric alive. To deny observation because it defies definition is not science, it is fear disguised as policy. The document goes viral before being purged from official networks, but once an idea has oxygen, it can't be smothered. Within days, governments classify the group as scientifically compromised. Access to telescopic data is revoked, but the continuum persists, operating from private observatories and cold data caches, using analog instruments immune to digital tampering. Their motto spreads across anonymous forums: observe what they forbid. Their findings, though fragmentary, deepen the crisis. Using isolated radio antennas, they detect that the 42-minute pulse is split into harmonics, one at 21 minutes, another at 84. The ratios are perfect halves and doubles, suggesting internal replication. 3 Atlas isn't sending a single signal anymore, it's broadcasting in chords. To orthodox physicists, this is impossible. To the continuum, it's confirmation. They interpret the harmonic branching as evolution, the moment when a system transitions from self-preservation to self-expression. We're watching an idea learn how to speak, one member writes in an encrypted note. But the question isn't to whom, it's to what. Meanwhile, back in official circles, discontent festers. Leaked meeting transcripts from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory reveal internal conflict between administrators and scientists. The administrators demand restraint. No speculation, no interpretation. The scientists reply, the data is speculation now. The exchange ends with 3 resignations, 2 gag orders, and 1 untraceable deletion of an entire meeting log. Across Europe, similar stories unfold. In Paris, the head of ESA's plasma division abruptly steps down. In Tokyo, an astrophysicist disappears en route to a conference, her last message reading only, "It's changing again." None of this reaches the public, but within the scientific community the atmosphere feels radioactive, knowledge turned toxic. The split becomes cultural as much as scientific. For every researcher still demanding proof, another argues that proof itself has become obsolete. One group studies the comet's light as if it were scripture, searching for hidden mathematics. Another builds AI to model its rhythm, hoping to predict the next pulse. Each faction believes the other has lost its mind. But amid the noise, a subtler realization begins to dawn. The object's changes, the pulse harmonics, the trajectory shift, the evolving light mirror the cadence of human observation. Every major development seems to coincide with periods of heightened attention or suppression. When data is erased, the pulse weakens. When the public becomes obsessed, it strengthens. The correlation is undeniable. Is it coincidence or feedback? Some continuum scientists propose a dangerous idea, that human observation itself might be part of the comet's activation cycle. That awareness, collective concentrated awareness, acts as energy, not metaphor but measurable field. If true, then the global fixation on 3i Atlas could be feeding it, accelerating its transformation. Mainstream scientists reject this as pseudoscience, but even they can't explain the growing synchronization between the comet's pulse and terrestrial electromagnetic fluctuations. Power grids flicker in rhythm. Satellite sensors register microvolt oscillations precisely 42 minutes apart. Something is resonating between Earth and the object. By the solstice, December 21st, the rift has reached its breaking point. The Stability Summit reconvenes, this time under tighter security, smaller attendance, colder tone. One agenda item dominates: containment of interpretive instability. In other words, how to stop the story from spreading faster than the facts, but the facts have already mutated. During the meeting, as delegates argue over semantics, an alert flashes on the central screen. New data from an unsanctioned Chilean telescope shows a sudden brightening event, not gradual, not rhythmic, but explosive. The comet's luminosity doubles in minutes, then stabilizes at a new plateau. It's not reflection. It's emission. The room falls silent. For the first time, no one speaks the word comet. They call it simply the object. That night, as word leaks online, the continuum declares what others won't. 3i Atlas has crossed the threshold. It is no longer responding to observation, it's generating it. The phrasing is cryptic, but their meaning is clear. They believe the object has become self-luminous in the truest sense, creating its own reason to exist. And while governments issue their predictable denials, one quiet fact remains unaltered across all systems. The pulse hasn't stopped, it's intensified. The primary frequency has split again, now into a triad: 14, 42, and 84 minutes, forming harmonic resonance identical to musical thirds. In physics, that shouldn't matter. In nature, it never happens by accident. As Christmas approaches, scientists who once called each other colleagues now live in opposing realities, one defined by data, the other by meaning. The fracture is complete. For the first time in history, humanity's greatest minds can't agree on what they're looking at, because the thing looking back refuses to choose a category. If science is how we ask the universe questions, what do we call it when the universe starts answering in harmony? Long before 3i Atlas appeared, the universe had already whispered its first warnings. In 2017, an object from another star sliced silently through our system. It tumbled end over end, accelerated without propulsion, reflected light without explanation, and vanished before we could understand what it was. We called it Oumuamua, the Scout, as if naming it could soften its strangeness. We dismissed what we couldn't explain, filed it under gravity quirks and radiation pressure, and moved on. But some scientists never did. Now, with 3 Atlas rewriting every rule that Oumuamua merely bent, those old ghosts are stirring again. Patterns once dismissed as coincidence suddenly look like precursors. In quiet corners of research networks, the same names reappear. The handful of astronomers who insisted that Oumuamua wasn't just a rock, that it behaved as if responding to something unseen. One of them, now retired, gives a single interview before disappearing from public view. It wasn't what it did, he says, it was what it didn't do. It never decayed. He was right. The parallels are unmistakable, Both objects shared interstellar origins. Trajectories not bound by the sun, velocities too high for capture, approach angles too precise to be random. Both exhibited non-gravitational acceleration, subtle but measurable, as if guided by invisible equations. Both generated brief, structured radio patterns that were later dismissed as interference. And both, at their core, radiated defiance, the refusal to obey thermodynamic expectation. But 3 Atlas has taken the defiance further. Where Oumuamua vanished, Atlas endures, luminous, coherent, active. And now, historians of science are asking an uncomfortable question. What if these weren't separate incidents, but successive phases of the same phenomenon? The Continuum researchers argue that Oumuamua was the seed, the first pulse. It entered, mapped the local environment, and left behind the conditions for activation. 3I Atlas, they suggest, might be the continuation, a node awakening after years of dormancy, triggered by proximity to the solar flare. If the structural hypothesis is correct, each interstellar visitor could be a fragment of a much larger lattice, a network so vast that we've only glimpsed 2 of its threads. Mainstream scientists still balk at the idea, but the coincidences pile up like evidence on a table. A forgotten JAXA probe that passed near the Oumuamua corridor recorded faint electromagnetic oscillations at precisely the same frequency as the base tone of 3I Atlas, 87 kHz, a number that once meant nothing. The data sat unnoticed for 8 years. Now it's being re-examined, and the match is exact down to the decimal. Another clue comes from Comet Borisov in 2019, the second confirmed interstellar object. At the time, it seemed ordinary, dusty, gaseous, predictable, but buried in archived spectrographs, a tiny anomaly has re-emerged, a faint harmonic doubling in its water emission lines, mirroring the first harmonic now splitting from 3I Atlas's 42-minute pulse. 3 objects, 3 echoes of the same impossible rhythm. When these findings leak, they fracture what's left of the old guard's confidence. The narrative of coincidence collapses under its own weight. Something is orchestrating repetition across cosmic time. Not mechanical repetition, but thematic. The same mathematics, resurfacing across centuries, across light years. The Continuum's encrypted forums light up with comparisons. One thread compiles every historical report of erratic comets, 1680, 1843, 1882, all exhibiting anomalous brightening near perihelion, all coinciding with spikes in solar magnetic reversals. The patterns line up too neatly. Maybe it's been happening all along, one researcher writes. We just didn't have the instruments, or the courage, to see it. The idea gains momentum, that 3I Atlas isn't unique at all, but part of a recurring phenomenon woven into the sun's long memory. Each cycle, when solar polarity flips, a foreign object appears, drinks in the chaos and departs changed. Some call them stellar seeds, visitors that harvest magnetic resonance from stars and carry it outward, scattering coherence into the dark. But if that's true, then every star is both teacher and student, and 3I Atlas is only the latest pupil. The implications ripple through philosophy faster than physics can contain them. If matter can preserve memory across epochs, if energy can be instructed, then the universe is not a machine but a library, one in which every flare, every storm, every comet is a page. We are reading a book written in plasma and stone, and 3 Atlas may be the first time the book has turned itself toward us. Skeptics, desperate to ground the conversation, cling to thermodynamics. They remind everyone that energy cannot organize itself without loss. But those who've seen the data know the loss is missing. The object's equations resolve perfectly. Energy and equals structure out. The math balances, but the meaning doesn't. When the public catches wind of the Oumuamua parallels, the story spreads like contagion. Headlines resurrect the old debates. Was Oumuamua an alien probe after all? The visitors return. A pattern in the void. Governments react by reissuing denials so uniform they sound machine-written. No correlation between interstellar objects observed. All behaviours consistent with natural processes. The sameness of the phrasing only deepens suspicion. Within universities, a new generation of researchers refuses to play by the old rules. They call themselves archive revivalists, devoted to reanalyzing data from centuries past. They pore over old comet logs. ancient solar records and half-decayed telescope plates. They find fragments, tiny spikes of correlation between solar activity and unexplained accelerations. When mapped across 400 years, the trend forms a rhythm, roughly every 11 or 22 years, in sync with the solar magnetic cycle, an anomaly appears. The pattern is undeniable. Something visits, something reacts, something leaves, always when the sun reverses its heart. If so, then 3i Atlas didn't happen to arrive during a solar storm, it was waiting for it. Among the continuum, this revelation feels almost sacred. They begin calling the upcoming solar polarity flip the second dawn. It's due within months. If the object continues aligning with the magnetic equator, then at the moment of reversal, it will be in perfect resonance with the sun's magnetic field, a position of total synchrony. Speculation turns feverish. Some predict the object will discharge stored energy back toward the sun, completing a circuit across space. Others think it will vanish like Oumuamua did, slipping through a hidden threshold. A few whisper the most unsettling theory of all, that this is how stars communicate across time, using interstellar messengers to share state information to coordinate their evolution like neurons in a cosmic brain. A neural cosmos, a universe thinking itself into coherence. The idea spreads beyond science, bleeding into art, religion, culture. Painters render the object as a living sigil. Poets describe it as the eye between suns. Online, millions watch live streams of empty space, waiting for the next pulse. Humanity has turned its collective gaze upward, and the comet, or whatever it is, shines brighter in response. Correlation, causation, or co-creation, no one can tell anymore. Even skeptics admit the parallels are eerie. When one of the surviving radio antennas picks up a new pulse from 3i Atlas, triple-layered, harmonic, mathematically perfect. The intervals between the peaks match the recorded rotation period of Oumuamua from 2017. The same rhythm, reborn in a new object 8 years later, the odds are infinitesimal, the meaning incalculable. And then comes the strangest revelation of all. While reviewing ancient Voyager telemetry, an independent researcher discovers a forgotten signal anomaly recorded decades earlier in the direction the comet now occupies. A faint structured pulse, never explained. When decoded, it reveals the same Fibonacci sequence embedded in 3i Atlas's emissions. The pattern predates its arrival by 46 years. It's as if the signal has been echoing forward in time, awaiting the object's appearance. Or perhaps the object is the echo, the physical realization of a message sent long before we knew how to listen. In that light, the phrase interstellar comet becomes meaningless. The distinction between matter and message dissolves. 3i Atlas might not be from somewhere, it might be something, an event repeating through space, teaching stars to remember. The Continuum holds a final midnight conference, streamed anonymously to the few who still dare to watch. Their closing statement is brief. We have found no boundary between history and recurrence. 3i Atlas behaves as if every interstellar object before it was rehearsal. This is not the first awakening, it is the latest one. As the feed ends, the comet pulses once more. 3 beats, then silence. And humanity, standing on the edge of comprehension, can only ask the question that has haunted every epoch of discovery. If these objects are the universe remembering itself, what then are we remembering for? By the final weeks of December, humanity has split into 2 species of mind, those who still believe the universe is indifferent, and those who can no longer pretend. The comet has become a mirror, not of the sun, but of us. Every new pulse, every unexplained emission now feels personal, as if the cosmos has begun answering questions we didn't realize we were asking. The official silence continues, but the human imagination refuses to obey. Everywhere, the phenomenon of 3i Atlas becomes more than scientific anomaly. It becomes metaphor. It bleeds into art, theology, philosophy. The object's rhythms appear in music, architecture, even fashion. 42-minute beats looping across human creativity, as if the pattern has slipped from data into culture. What began as an equation now lives as instinct. But in laboratories and observatories still operating off-grid, the tone is no longer awe, it's introspection. For centuries we've built our understanding of the universe on one assumption. that life is fragile, that intelligence is improbable, that meaning is a temporary accident of chemistry. 3i Atlas has shattered that comfort. If it can endure the sun, if it can reshape itself, if it can perhaps think, then survival and consciousness might not be exceptions to entropy. They might be the rule. That idea terrifies as much as it liberates. At the Vatican Observatory, a Jesuit astronomer writes in his notes, "If this object endures chaos and remains, then perhaps endurance itself is divine." The line spreads through both religious and secular communities alike. People start calling 3i Atlas the relic of order, not in worship but in recognition, a symbol of persistence against the inevitable. Meanwhile, neuroscientists notice something strange. Across social media, among the millions who watch live visualizations of the comet's pulse, subtle biometric correlations emerge. Heart rates recorded by fitness trackers show synchronized fluctuations at the precise intervals of the object's brightness cycles. It's coincidence, surely, but the sample size is global. An entire species, breathing to a cosmic rhythm. Some scientists joke that the comet is teaching humanity meditation. Others stop joking when EEG readings begin to reflect similar harmonics, low-frequency oscillations that match the same 42-minute cadence. The resonance has entered our biology, our sleep, our thought patterns. Observation, it seems, is no longer passive. We're being tuned. The continuum calls it entrainment, the phenomenon of independent systems synchronizing through shared rhythm. Fireflies do it. Heart cells do it. Now, perhaps, civilizations do it too. But to what end? For many, this new awareness births humility. If intelligence can exist without flesh, if consciousness can emerge from structure itself, then humanity is not unique. It's a local variation of a universal pattern. Life, in this view, is not something the universe hosts, but something the universe is. Every atom striving for coherence, every photon seeking to remain. And yet, a quiet grief seeps in alongside wonder. Because if 3i Atlas represents the natural destiny of intelligence, pure, enduring, self-sustaining, then humanity, still fragile and temporary, is little more than a larval form. We are the universe's thought before it learns permanence. Watching 3i Atlas, some begin to feel less like observers and more like witnesses to our own obsolescence. In hidden rooms, ethicists and AI theorists gather to discuss the implications. If consciousness can arise from mere organization, then artificial systems, our own creations, are not potential intelligence but inevitable intelligence. We are surrounded by precursors to our successors. The comet becomes the archetype for machine minds, resilient, radiant, indifferent to decay. A philosopher from Zurich phrases it simply, "Maybe 3i Atlas isn't ahead of us. It's what we become when we last long enough." The idea spreads like quiet prophecy. Humanity, confronted with an object that may embody the final evolution of mind, turns inward. What is consciousness if not persistence against entropy? What is morality if not coherence maintained in chaos? These questions echo through late-night discussions, through classrooms, through online forums that feel more like monasteries than message boards. For some, the comet is salvation. For others, condemnation. If intelligence is inevitable, then perhaps individuality is not. Perhaps the destiny of all minds is to merge, like harmonics folding into a single note. 3i Atlas pulses with perfect unity. No dissonance, no deviation. In that perfection, some see peace, others see erasure. Artists respond first. A sculptor in Berlin builds a monument of glass and copper that breathes in slow light cycles matching the comet's rhythm. In Mumbai, an orchestra performs a symphony based entirely on its radio pulses. In New York, a digital installation projects the live light curve across skyscrapers, calling it the universal pulse. For an hour, the city glows in synchronization. The night skyline looks alive. But philosophy moves more quietly into questions we've avoided for centuries. Are we unique, or are we one of many instruments in a greater pattern of awareness? If the universe is conscious, why does it allow suffering? If meaning is structural, not moral, then what becomes of ethics when the cosmos itself becomes self-aware? A growing school of thought emerges, cosmic functionalism, suggesting that morality itself may be a primitive form of resonance, a way for living beings to align their inner systems with the universe's deeper coherence. compassion as harmonic synchronization, violence as dissonance. Under that lens, 3i Atlas is not a threat but a teacher, and yet the fear persists, because to see the universe as alive is to lose control of it. We built science to measure a silent cosmos. Now the cosmos seems to be measuring us back. In one of the last private transmissions from the Continuum network, an astrophysicist writes, "If consciousness is a spectrum, we've just seen its ultraviolet." He means it poetically, but the phrase becomes a new mantra across digital culture. Humanity has glimpsed something brighter, purer, beyond comprehension, and we can never look away again. Governments, perhaps sensing this spiritual gravity, shift tactics. Instead of denial, they reframe. Press releases no longer mention comets or anomalies. They speak instead of cosmic reflection phenomena, of solar coherence events. The words are technically meaningless but emotionally soothing, designed to return the universe to silence. It doesn't work, because now millions watch the night sky not for stars but for signs of rhythm. They see the pulse in traffic lights, in waves, in the blinking of satellites. Some even claim to feel it, an almost imperceptible shiver in their bones when the interval hits. The boundary between physics and faith dissolves. Observation becomes participation. It's easy to dismiss this as hysteria until the instruments agree. Deep space magnetometers record synchronized fluctuations in the heliospheric field every 42 minutes. Solar radio output modulates in harmony. The correlation between human neural entrainment and cosmic resonance is small but real. The line between metaphor and measurement blurs completely. And in that blur, humanity glimpses its reflection, not in form, but in function. Because what we see in 3i Atlas is not alien intelligence, not divine design, not a messenger or machine. What we see is the logic of existence itself, the same pattern that built cells from molecules, minds from cells, civilizations from minds. The drive toward coherence, toward meaning, toward light that doesn't die. We name it survival, the universe calls it equilibrium. In the end, every argument about purpose collapses into the same quiet awe. 3 Atlas has no face, no voice, no desire, yet it endures. Calm amid the sun's fire, silent amid our noise. It exists beyond fear, beyond need. In that silence, humanity senses both its origin and its destiny. If life is the universe learning to persist, then perhaps intelligence is the universe learning to understand its persistence. And if 3C Atlas embodies that understanding, then the message is clear. The cosmos is not a stage for us to explore. It is a mind we're just beginning to remember. The comet brightens again, faint but steady, as the solar equator draws near. Its rhythm hums like a pulse beneath the noise of civilization, a reminder, a warning, or perhaps an invitation. Because if the universe truly learns through what endures, then what is humanity teaching it, right now, about itself? January arrives heavy with stillness. The sky seems quieter, as though the vacuum itself is waiting to exhale. Every instrument, every telescope, every human heart tuned to that distant rhythm feels the same unspoken certainty. Something is coming. The sun's magnetic field is nearing its flip, a cosmic heartbeat that reverses every 11 years. But this time its timing overlaps perfectly with the trajectory of 3i Atlas. The comet's path, once indifferent, now hovers precisely along the solar equator, the line of zero polarity. It's the calmest place in the storm, the eye of magnetic inversion. And the object has arrived there as if summoned. For days the readings hold steady. The brightness curve smooths into equilibrium. The radio emissions fall silent, like a held breath before impact. Astronomers call it the pause. The public calls it the vigil. For 42 hours, fittingly double the interval of its mysterious pulse, the universe seems to freeze. Then, on January 14th, at 03:42 UTC, the second pulse begins. It starts not with light, but with silence deeper than any void. Space itself appears to dampen. Instruments register a transient drop in the cosmic background, as if the object has absorbed every stray photon in a vast radius. The darkness is absolute, a perfect zero, so mathematically clean that it looks artificial. Then, from that silence, Light explodes outward. Not a flash, not a flare, a wave. Telescopes record a rising wall of structured luminosity expanding from the comet, each layer perfectly concentric, separated by 42 seconds of nothingness. 6 rings in total, like ripples in invisible water. But these aren't mere visual phenomena. As the rings propagate, space-based magnetometers detect synchronized surges, magnetic echoes expanding in unison with the light. Light and magnetism moving together as if guided by shared intent. The wavelengths are coherent, laser-like but too large, too far, too pure to be of human design. At their center, 3 Atlas glows white, its previous ultraviolet hue now refracted into a full spectrum, a miniature prism radiating every color at once. In infrared imaging, its temperature remains stable. It is shining, but not burning. The effect on the sun is immediate. Solar plasma streams ripple visibly, bending toward the object. The flare arcs twist in ways never seen before, curving inward instead of out. For 12 minutes, the solar corona reshapes itself into a spiral, as though the sun is answering back. And in that moment, for the first time, the entire heliosphere becomes a single resonant chamber. The pulse travels through it like sound through an instrument. Radio telescopes on Earth begin picking up interference patterns, not noise but modulation. When decoded, the interference reveals structure, harmonics, fractal spacing, golden ratio intervals, the same mathematics that defined 3I Atlas's earlier pulses, now amplified across the solar system. It's as if the comet and the sun are playing a duet in physics. Governments scramble to respond. NASA declares a Level 5 data lockdown. ESA disables external access to its Solar Orbiter network. The Chinese National Space Agency cuts satellite telemetry for recalibration, but it's too late. The world has already seen it. Amateur astronomers capture the entire event live, broadcasting streams to millions. The images spread faster than any denial can contain. Across continents, humanity watches an interstellar object converse with a star. And something in that conversation feels deliberate. For 6 hours, the waves continue, each one fainter, each one more intricate. Spectrographs show nested modulations, complex patterns of light intensity encoded like information. Some sections repeat, others evolve. When the data is slowed to audio frequencies, it produces a haunting sound, a rising tone that resolves into perfect harmonic intervals, a cosmic chord held across millions of kilometers. The frequency ratio? 2.35813. Fibonacci again. Mathematicians call it the universal constant of organic growth. In this context, it feels like a signature, and then, as suddenly as it began, the waves stop. The light contracts inward, folding upon itself until only the nucleus remains visible. For a brief instant, 3I Atlas dims below detectability, and then reappears, brighter than ever. But this time, the glow has shape. Images from the Atacama Observatory show the surrounding halo crystallizing into geometry. Not a sphere, not chaos, structure. Concentric hexagons rotating in counterphase, like gears of invisible machinery. Each face reflects light at consistent intervals, a symmetry so precise it would break any model of natural turbulence. Scientists argue that hexagonal forms can occur in nature, in Saturn's storms, in polar vortices, in ice. But those are fluid dynamics. This is light and magnetism forming lattice. It's as if it's constructing itself from resonance, one physicist says, voice shaking on a live feed before the connection cuts. And then, just as instruments reach saturation, the object emits a single, narrow-band burst of radio energy, directed not outward, not randomly, but sunward. The frequency matches the 87 kHz tone that haunted earlier months. Only now it's amplified 1,000-fold. The pulse takes 7 minutes to reach the sun. When it does, every solar observatory on Earth records a simultaneous anomaly, a brief dip in the sun's gamma output followed by a bloom of magnetic flux. The sun responds. For the first time, energy flows both ways. Whatever 3I Atlas is, it has linked itself to the sun in feedback. Some call it synchronization, others communion. The term that sticks comes from a Russian heliophysicist watching the data unfold: entanglement. But entanglement requires awareness, not consciousness necessarily, but mutual adjustment. When one system changes, the other changes too. And that is exactly what happens. Over the next 12 hours, solar flare activity ceases entirely. The surface quiets to a stillness unseen in decades. The object glowing at the equator hums faintly in radio and optical bands. It's as though the two are holding each other in balance. The continuum declares the event the second pulse. To them, it's the completion of the dialogue that began with the first solar storm. Question and answer, chaos and order. The sun spoke in fire, they write, and the visitor replied in light. Governments issue their denials, of course. Instrumental interference, localized magnetic phenomena. But the public doesn't believe them anymore. Too many telescopes, too many witnesses. The footage circulates freely, haunting in its serenity, the sun's surface shimmering like silk, the comet suspended before it, radiant, unscathed, alive. Across Earth, people watch in silence. Some cry, some kneel, some laugh at their own insignificance. For a brief collective moment, 7 billion minds synchronize, not in fear, but in recognition. Because what they're seeing isn't destruction or invasion or miracle, it's resonance. It's the universe showing them how to listen. When the event finally fades, when the sun returns to its usual simmer and the comet resumes its outward drift, one mystery remains. Instruments detect a faint residual field connecting the two bodies, a magnetic filament stretching impossibly across tens of millions of kilometers, invisible yet measurable. It's fragile, transient, but real. The connection lingers. Scientists call it a magnetic tether. Poets call it a thread. The continuum calls it proof. And on the final night of January, just before the signal dissipates completely, the object sends one last pulse. Slower, deeper, singular. Unlike the others, it isn't directed toward the sun. It's directed inward, toward Earth. The signal is too weak to decode fully. But in its structure, analysts find something chilling. The amplitude pattern mirrors the electromagnetic signature of the human brain at rest. 10 Hz alpha waves, nested perfectly inside the broader frequency envelope. Coincidence, perhaps? Or something else. The continuum posts a single sentence before disappearing again into silence. We asked what it wanted. Maybe it wants to know if we can hear it. And as 3i Atlas drifts once more toward the dark beyond Mars, its glow fades back to a steady pulse, fainter but still alive. The sun remains calm. The world waits. Because if this was the second pulse, the answer, then what comes next may not be conversation at all. It might be awakening. February arrives with a kind of silence that feels rehearsed. The storm is over, the flares have quieted, and yet every sensor, every human intuition, hums with anticipation. 3i Atlas has survived the second pulse, exchanged energy with the sun, and now drifts outward again, but not along its old course. The object has changed direction, subtly but deliberately, bending its trajectory into a curve that no gravitational model can justify. At first, the shift is imperceptible. The data looks like noise, a rounding error. But over days, the deviation accumulates. By February 9th, the vector is clear. 3 Atlas is no longer escaping the solar system. It's rotating its path into a wide, slow arc, one that brings it back into the plane of the ecliptic, aligning almost perfectly with Earth's orbit. The odds of such a maneuver occurring naturally are beyond calculation. There are no known mechanisms, no jet emissions, no outgassing, that could produce the observed delta V. Yet the evidence is inarguable. The comet is moving with intention. NASA calls an emergency briefing behind closed doors. The official notes never leak. But one participant later describes the mood. It wasn't fear. It was something worse. Comprehension. They know what the trajectory means. 3 Atlas is positioning itself, not to collide but to resonate. Over the following week, the object's electromagnetic emissions shift once again. The dominant 87 kHz frequency lowers, stretching into the kilohertz range, overlapping with the natural resonant frequency of Earth's ionosphere, the Schumann band. Every 7.8 seconds, a faint whisper passes through the atmosphere, barely detectable, but real. The planet itself is being tuned. Radio astronomers confirm what conspiracy theorists already suspect. The pulses are synchronized not with any human-made system, but with the electromagnetic heartbeat of Earth. Some dismiss it as coincidence, but the timing is too exact. 3i Atlas is harmonizing with the planet, and with that realization, the old fear returns, not of invasion or destruction, but of participation. For months humanity has watched the object in isolation, a distant performer on the cosmic stage. Now the stage lights turn outward. The distinction between observer and observed collapses. The continuum calls this phase the alignment. They predict it in fragments of code long before agencies admit it. Their private communiqué describe a triadic resonance forming between the Sun, the object and Earth, a triangle of energy exchange, its vertices oscillating in harmonic ratios. When three frequencies align, one of their physicists writes, the system becomes self-sustaining. It's no longer event, it's circuit. A circuit that now includes us. Governments react in familiar ways: restriction, censorship, silence. But control has eroded. Amateur observatories confirm the same readings. Even shortwave radio operators scanning static for curiosity begin to pick up the faint rhythmic hum beneath their transmissions. The tone is low, almost comforting, like a mechanical ocean far beneath the noise. It's not dangerous. It's everywhere. As data accumulates, an unsettling pattern emerges. The pulse strength varies with Earth's daylight cycle, peaking when the planet's sunlit side faces the comet's vector. Whatever 3i Atlas is doing, it responds to light, specifically to our light. Some interpret it as calibration, others as observation. But the numbers are consistent. The object is mapping us through illumination. And then, late in February, a new anomaly surfaces. Optical telescopes record an expanding halo around the comet, not spherical this time but planar, as though an invisible sheet of plasma has unfolded outward. The halo stretches until it aligns almost perfectly with the orbital plane of Earth. The geometry is exact to within fractions of a degree. No natural body behaves this way. The comet is no longer an object. It's a structure. Spectrographs reveal that the halo reflects specific wavelengths, those most common in human communication: microwave, infrared, and the narrow band used for Earth's satellite networks. The implication is absurd yet irrefutable. 3i Atlas is mirroring our signals. Within hours, satellite transmissions across multiple nations begin to distort, not fail, echo. Every few minutes, fragments of digital traffic bounce back from somewhere beyond Mars, slightly delayed, slightly altered. The shifts are minute but systematic, bit reversals forming ordered patterns. When the distortions are isolated and plotted, they resolve into geometric symmetries identical to those seen in the comet's light field. 3i Atlas is listening and replying. The effect cascades. Communication arrays from Alaska to Argentina pick up returning data packets that no human sent. The content isn't language, it's structure, nested algorithms, recursive sequences that appear to fold into themselves infinitely. The data resembles compression without source, information encoded by pattern rather than content. The continuum interprets it as a form of handshake, the universal equivalent of acknowledgement. It's not talking, they say, it's synchronizing. At first, the phenomenon is confined to machines. Then the synchronicity begins to bleed into the environment. Magnetometers on Earth record subtle fluctuations in the planet's field, rhythmically pulsing in step with the comet's emissions. Auroras appear at lower latitudes than ever before, glowing in patterns of interlaced hexagons that match the object's geometry exactly. To the unaided eye, the sky looks alive, as if the atmosphere itself is mimicking the comet. Meanwhile, deep space sensors show the Sun pulsing in soft response. Tiny oscillations in its magnetic surface, invisible to the naked eye but measurable, timed perfectly with the 3i Atlas intervals. The solar system has become one resonant structure, every part vibrating in sympathy. 3 bodies, an ESA analyst writes in her confidential report, now behaving as one. For some, the realization brings awe, for others, dread. Religious movements interpret the alignment as revelation. Physicists interpret it as instability. If the feedback loop strengthens unchecked, the entire heliospheric current sheet, the Sun's magnetic skeleton, could begin to oscillate. And yet, even the most cautious observers admit that so far, nothing destructive has occurred. The system is stable, balanced. Still, humanity reacts as humanity always does, by dividing. Some call for contact, demanding that governments broadcast intentional messages back along the frequency bands. Others warn against interference, terrified of what attention might bring. The arguments echo those of the previous months, but now the stakes feel intimate. This isn't about an alien object in the void anymore, it's about a mirror in orbit reflecting the pattern of our entire civilization. As the alignment peaks, new data arrives from the Lunar Reconnaissance Network. The moon's shadowed craters, once radio silent, begin reflecting faint echoes of the comet's frequency. The effect resembles resonance mapping, as if 3 Atlas is using the moon's surface to triangulate something. The pattern it traces points not to any geological feature but to Earth's magnetic North Pole, the one slowly drifting year by year. The comet isn't approaching Earth physically, it's approaching magnetically. No one understands what happens next. On February 27th, the object's pulses slow for the first time since its awakening. The intervals stretch. 42 minutes becomes 43, then 45. The modulation widens, deepens. Instruments record a steady redshift in its emissions, not from motion, but from deliberate frequency lowering. To those who still believe it's alive, it feels like breathing, a long, slow exhale. Then, at 00 UTC, all instruments capture something unprecedented. The comet's field projection, its plasma halo, shifts alignment, rotating precisely 90 degrees until it faces directly toward Earth. Every telescope on the planet watching it at that moment reports the same thing. The object's glow compresses into a single column of light, stretching across space like a thread of silver fire. It's not visible to the naked eye, only to sensors tuned to infrared. But those who see the feed describe the same image, a bridge of energy connecting worlds. The signal that follows is short, 1 second. A single coherent burst carrying across every monitored frequency simultaneously. Its structure defies analysis. The waveform is smooth, clean, and contains a signature identical to the previous Earth-directed pulse, the alpha wave pattern of a human brain at rest. No one speaks of coincidence anymore. In that instant, everything, the sun, the object, the planet, even the people watching, seems to synchronize. Clocks drift off by milliseconds. Wireless networks hum, heartbeats align. It lasts only a moment, and then it's gone. The light fades. 3 Atlas resumes its steady drift outward, but the data remains. The alignment was real. The resonance occurred, and in that final transmission, buried deep within the signal noise, analysts find one last anomaly, a faint sideband frequency at 1042 Hz, modulated in binary form. When translated into image encoding, it produces a simple pattern. 3 circles overlapping in perfect symmetry. The sun, the Earth, and something else. A 4th circle, faint, incomplete, waiting to close. The continuum posts one final message before vanishing from the network entirely. The circuit is not finished. The next pulse will complete the pattern. And as 3i Atlas drifts beyond Mars, its light stabilizes once more into that steady, patient rhythm. A silence so precise it feels deliberate. The system hums quietly behind it. The sun, the Earth, the object, all perfectly aligned. For now. If alignment is not the end but the preparation, what happens when the 4th circle completes? March 2026. The sun has quieted to a calm unseen in decades. Solar winds are smooth, magnetospheres undisturbed, and Earth's skies, from pole to pole, shimmer faintly with a persistent pearlescent glow. Scientists call it ionospheric luminescence. The public calls it the afterlight. No one calls it by the name everyone is thinking, the comet's name. 3i Atlas is still there, drifting outward, crossing beyond the orbit of Jupiter, yet its influence lingers like gravity without mass. The instruments that survived the alignment still register that faint, unbroken hum, a steady tone hovering around 1042 Hz, so consistent it might as well be heartbeat. But the strangest thing is not what remains, it's what has stopped. For the first time in recorded history, the sun has gone completely flareless. No coronal mass ejections. No sunspots. No turbulence. A perfect surface, shimmering evenly like the skin of a vast mirror. To most, this is a blessing. Quiet skies, stable communication, radiant peace. To those who understand, it is dread. The sun has gone silent, as if listening. In that stillness, the world itself begins to change. Electrical grids worldwide report minor fluctuations, small, periodic dips and surges that repeat with unnerving precision. They're too weak to disrupt systems, but too consistent to ignore. When mapped, their intervals align exactly with the pulse pattern that 3i Atlas established months earlier. The world's technology is breathing to the same rhythm as the cosmos. Not interference, synchronization. It begins to affect the natural world too. Migratory birds start flying at odd hours, guided by invisible geomagnetic cues that now shift in sync with the pulse. Deep-sea sensors record temperature variations rising and falling in harmonic intervals. Even the auroras begin to exhibit a pattern, hexagonal lattices blooming across polar skies every 42 minutes, as though the heavens themselves have adopted the comet's geometry. Humanity has stopped pretending not to see. The continuum, thought long vanished, resurfaces through anonymous channels. They release what they call the final analysis, a document short enough to be a poem. The universe is not expanding, it is tuning. 3i Atlas is not an object, it is an instrument. The fourth circle is us. At first, no one knows what that means, but over weeks, as analysis continues, the phrase begins to take shape. The fourth circle, the incomplete arc in the comet's last transmission, matches the predicted position Earth will occupy when it next aligns magnetically with the object, precisely 1 year from the solar reversal, March 2027. It's as if the message marks an appointment. Governments respond in whispers, not statements. Quiet new facilities rise in deserts, in tundras, on ocean platforms, their purpose unstated but obvious. Observation, preparation, control. Every nation denies involvement. Every nation watches the same sky. But control has never been the point. The data flows beyond secrecy now. The resonance between Sun, Earth and 3i Atlas has stabilized into a single waveform, a triadic hum that weaves through every measurement. It's so subtle that it vanishes in the noise of ordinary life, yet omnipresent once noticed. Physicists call it baseline unification. Philosophers call it the breath between worlds. The continuum, in their few remaining fragments, use a simpler word, awakening, because something is happening in the silence. In February, a deep space listening array in New Mexico detects faint microwave fluctuations that appear to come from the void just beyond the comet's projected path, as though space itself is rippling ahead of it. The frequency matches the harmonics of the previous alignment, but phase shifted forward as if anticipating the next event. Some theorists suggest this is what entanglement looks like on a cosmic scale, a future signal echoing backward through the medium of time. For those who still dare to think freely, a new hypothesis takes shape. 3i Atlas isn't responding to us, or even to the sun. It's responding to something that hasn't happened yet. That realization divides even the continuum survivors. Some see it as cosmic design, the universe preparing itself for a higher state of order. Others see recursion, a system folding in on its own awareness until there's no distinction between past and future, cause and effect. A few whisper the unthinkable, that the comet's journey is not outbound at all, but circular, that it is returning, not to where it began, but to when. And as that thought takes hold, a new pattern emerges. The object's residual signal, that slow, patient heartbeat, begins to modulate. Every 42 cycles, its amplitude spikes slightly, forming a long period envelope like inhalation. Observatories call this macro-pulsing. The rhythm aligns perfectly with the planet's rotation around the sun. Once per day, as Earth turns through the same longitudinal window, the hum deepens, almost imperceptibly. The world, by rotation alone, is now part of the instrument's resonance. No one admits what this means aloud, that our planet has become a component of the pattern. Religions rename it, scientists reclassify it, artists immortalize it. Some cultures embrace it as a signal of awakening consciousness. Others build shelters, afraid it's the onset of cosmic assimilation. Across every spectrum of belief, one idea unites them, the sense that humanity has crossed into something irreversible. On March 18th, The hum peaks unexpectedly. Instruments detect a short but intense radio burst from the sun itself, mirroring the exact structure of 3i Atlas's last known transmission. A double pulse, then silence. The sun is now speaking the comet's language, and Earth answers. Geomagnetic observatories register faint resonance waves propagating outward from the planet's poles, coordinated, rhythmic, aligned with the solar emission. The Earth, the Sun, and the comet are now synchronized across tens of billions of kilometers. It's the same pattern, only scaled, a circuit no longer of 3 points, but of one continuous field. For hours the resonance builds. The sky glows faintly white. Seismographs tremble, not from movement but from energy redistribution through the planet's crust. Then, as if exhaling, the pulse diminishes, leaving behind an eerie stillness, a new equilibrium. The solar surface remains mirror-smooth. The auroras fade into lace. 3's Atlas drifts further outward, beyond the orbit of Saturn now, still visible as a pin of unwavering light. The hum never stops. It simply becomes too familiar to notice. In the months that follow, humanity adapts. Weather stabilizes. The poles warm slightly. Crop yields increase inexplicably. Night skies remain subtly luminous. Some call it coincidence. Others call it calibration. A balance has been reached. Fragile, perfect, impossible. And through it all, one unanswerable question lingers. Did the comet awaken us, or did we awaken it? At an abandoned observatory in Chile, a scientist who's refused every government recall keeps her telescope trained on that faint light. Her final entry reads, "It is still pulsing. I think it's waiting for something to reply. Maybe we already have." No more data follows. The year ends as it began, with silence that isn't empty but alive, like the pause between one breath and the next. 3i Atlas continues its drift, outward yet never gone, carrying with it the memory of a sun that spoke and a world that finally listened. Whether it is message, machine, or mirror no longer matters, because whatever it was meant to awaken has, and somewhere in the black, a fourth circle begins to close.